Welcome to the Luke Macias Show. We have a couple political dominoes falling. Governor Greg Abbott announced for re-election and rolled out a very aggressive property tax plan, which we will overview with you today. There are a couple other things happening that you would like to know about. People who are not running or have decided to run. How does that change the continued political landscape that's shifting in Texas? We'll cover that today. Let's get to the show. First, Congressman Jody Arrington from Lubbock announced this week that he is not running for re-election. Jody Arrington has been a congressman, or will be by the end of this term, for a decade out from Lubbock. He originally he was a vice chancellor at Texas Tech University, who then ran for state senate against Charles Perry. And the funny thing about that is that he was the establishment candidate at the time with all the establishment backing. And then Charles Perry was the conservative candidate who got elected. Jody Arrington later decided to run for the open congressional seat that came open that covers Lubbock to Abilene, got elected. And honestly, because he had run as the more moderate establishment candidate for state senate, I and many people assumed that when he got to Congress, he would be more of an establishment type. And the truth is that Jody Arrington was a conservative congressman during his tenure. He often aligned with the more conservative side of the GOP in Congress, but was also put in charge of the Budget Committee, helped pass the big, beautiful bill with President Donald Trump, and accomplished several different key things. But you saw him time and time again often take the more conservative side, and you saw him pushing the Overton window when it came to policy discussion. So I do want to recognize the service that he gave. We have yet to see any major person decide to announce to run for his seat. But when these things open up, people start running, those people hold other positions, those positions open up. So we will see who all decides to run for that congressional seat, and we'll probably bring you updates along the way. But this again points to all of these open congressional seats. I mean, it's not just the 5 new ones that opened up that were redistricted. We also have all of these congressmen leaving. And so you have the Wesley Hunt seat, because Wesley Hunt is running for Senate. You have Jody Arrington's, you have Chip Roy's, you have Michael McCall's. Michael McCall is probably the most liberal Republican congressman from Texas, so that is a great opportunity to replace him with a more conservative person. Chris Gober is an elections attorney who has represented Elon Musk, Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, and a bunch of other people. If you are an operative in Texas, you know who Chris Gober is. If you're somebody who runs campaigns or has worked in PACs or anything, you definitely have run across Chris Gober before. He would be a pretty significant upgrade from Michael McCall. He's probably the leading contender in that seat as an example of an opportunity to move to the right when it comes to who all is running and who could get elected in these various positions. Also last week, Tarrant County GOP Chairman Beau French announced that he would not be running for re-election, which opens up the chairmanship, the way it works. And in fact, this morning he did resign. We'll get to that in a second. But when he didn't say, I'm just running for re-election, he said, I'm going to be resigning. And so he has resigned as of 30 minutes ago, maybe an hour ago. And there will be a special election to replace him. Some of you don't recall this, but Beau French was himself elected as the chairman of the largest red county in Texas, Tarrant County, in a special election himself. So he ran and was elected to replace Rick Barnes, who dropped out to run for Tarrant County tax assessor collector. And it was a very close race. At the time, a lot of more establishment people attacked Beau, but he won. Then he went on to raise $1 million for the Tarrant County GOP, roughly $1 million. I don't know the exact dollar amount, but it was very high, more than has ever been raised in any effort, and spent more money to ensure that Donald Trump won Tarrant County. So there will now be a special election where the precinct chairman, about 300 of them, will come together and replace him. Tim Davis has announced that he's running. Tim Davis, if you're in Tarrant County, is a longtime Republican activist and a very conservative Republican at that. County chair positions are very important. And I have already talked to a number of people who are running for re-election as their county chairman, or their county chair is not running. And so they are stepping up to run in that place. It is very important that we have very conservative county chairs. Beau French was one of the county chairs that would organize statewide county chairs to engage in the legislative process. There were a number of times that there were letters that originated out of the Tarrant GOP that were signed by 150 county chairs, all asking for us to close the Republican primary, asking for certain legislative priorities of the Republican Party of Texas to be advanced out of committee, to be voted out of a chamber. It's very important that we have county chairs who align with the Republican Party. Remember, there are two different worldviews. Some party chairs get elected and just decide to cheerlead for whatever Republicans in power. And honestly, they usually cheerlead more for the more moderate people in power. And then others get elected and they go, our job is to make sure Republicans win and then pass their legislative agenda. Win and then enact the laws that mean that the left loses. In politics, there are winners and there are losers. And you need to win. You want to win. You wouldn't be in this if you didn't think that we should win. And every time the right wins, the left loses. That is the conflict we are in. In order for us to win, we have to pass laws that stop sexualizing children, right? And when that happens, the left loses because they lose an opportunity they have to groom the next generation in a broken and dark way that would lead them into a path of being more likely a leftist when they grow up. Winners and losers. Some of our county chairs are committed to that and understand that, and some county chairs just like having a position. So I'm glad that Tim Davis has stepped up, and I do think that it's likely that he'll wrap that campaign up shortly. For those of you in Tarrant County who follow this program, that's something you should be watching to make sure that Tarrant County keeps a conservative county chair in that position. Now, the reason Beau French stepped down is because he also announced this morning that he is running for Railroad Commission in the state of Texas. Beau French is running for Texas Railroad Commissioner. No, railroad commissioners do not legislate railroads. What they do is regulate, they don't legislate, they regulate the energy sector in Texas, oil and gas. And Beau French has a background, his family has a background in oil and gas. He's been a successful entrepreneur, investor in a bunch of different businesses. And he's been a long time committed conservative in the Republican Party. And so Beau has decided to run for railroad commissioner. He just launched his campaign this morning, about an hour before I started recording. So if you have not followed that, I would go to X, follow Beau, because that will be a campaign that many of you are following from now till March. We're going to have a lot of contested statewide elections. One that will not be a competitive race will be the re-election of Governor Greg Abbott. He announced for re-election on Sunday. And one thing I'm very grateful for is that he rolled out in his re-election announcement a property tax plan. And this is something that a lot of people had been hearing, that this session, Governor Abbott pushed across the finish line school choice. And it was something he had been working on for a long time. Some Republicans had been pushing back on him for. And so last election cycle, he worked hard to unelect a lot of those bad Republicans so that he brought in a more conservative legislature to pass school choice and defeat liberal Marxist teacher unions. And so this next session, one of the things that Governor Abbott clearly seems to be taking on as a big project is property taxes. And I want to overview some of the things that he's doing, his 6 steps to overhaul the property tax system. Let's talk about this. I'm going to just read from the overview of what his own campaign put out, and we'll kind of break it down. Governor Greg Abbott has delivered the largest property tax relief ever provided by any governor in American history, $51 billion in relief for Texans this session alone. Now, I've already taken a little bit of issue with that framing. It is true that $51 billion goes to public schools in a way that doesn't require property tax collections and then compression and then the homestead exemptions. And so they add all that up and you go, it's $51 billion. But it's not new, right? They came in with a $24 billion surplus. They only delivered like less than 7 billion, 6.8 billion in new property tax relief. So they kind of keep just building upon it. Like next cycle or session, if they only give $1 or $2 billion in new property tax relief and all your property taxes go up, then they'll say 53 billion. And then they'll say that's the largest in American history ever. But I will say that the 6 steps that Greg Abbott is proposing would significantly prevent the creep that we keep seeing on our bills. So let's look at those things. However, this is from the governor's statement. However, spiking appraisals and local government tax hikes are wiping out the savings of hardworking Texans. We all know that's true. Governor Greg Abbott is going to overhaul the property tax system to give Texans the power to stop local governments from hiking your property taxes. Texans deserve complete control over their property taxes. So let's read some of these proposals. The first one is require common sense local spending limits. Texas families must live within their means, and local governments must too. The state of Texas has 5 spending limits, but there are no standardized limits for cities, counties, and other local government entities. Limiting local government spending to population plus inflation, or 3.5%, the lesser of the two, whichever one is lesser, would ensure fiscally responsible governance. Other safeguards like the state's debt limit and prohibition on deficit spending are common sense policies that should apply to all levels of government. So not just a spending cap, but also a debt limit and a prohibition on deficit spending for local governments. Governor Abbott's plan will protect taxpayer dollars and institute fiscally responsible policies that will keep Texas prosperous. So that's 1, a spending limit. 2, require 2/3 voter approval for tax increases. This is huge. I don't know why this didn't pass. He wanted it to pass this last session, and there seemed to be pushback in the Texas Senate. But here's what it says. Right now, it is far too easy for local governments to impose higher taxes on Texans without their approval. It must be harder, not easier, for local governments to take your hard-earned money. In fact, certain laws regarding property taxes and spending require a 2/3 and in some cases a 4/5 vote. Governor Abbott's plan would require a 2/3 voter approval on all local property tax increases. So Northeast ISD is a school district, one of the largest school districts in Bexar County. I live in it. And this last election in November, there were 6 different bonds that said this is a property tax increase. Okay? This is a property tax increase. And 2 or 3 of them, I didn't check after like 7 because several of them were very close. But 2 of the 6, I believe, failed and 4 of the 6 passed. But the 4 of the 6 that passed only passed with like 52, 54% of the vote. And so what Governor Abbott here is saying is that he wants the law to be that if you don't get 2/3, if everyone's not kind of on board with the need for this, you're not raising taxes. I think that's a great idea. Empower voters to roll back taxes. I love this idea. The state of Texas does not levy any property tax. Local governments control your property taxes, and they can raise them in multiple ways. Unfortunately, there are limited options for taxpayers to lower their tax bills. Under Governor Abbott's plan, if 15% of registered voters in a local area sign a petition, they can force a rollback election to lower rates, reducing taxes for all property owners and constraining the growth and spending of local governments. Absolutely awesome idea to empower the grassroots. I would love for that 15% to be brought down to 10%. Honestly, the average amount of people that vote in a city council election is like 5 to 10%. So I feel like we should bring it down to 5 or 10%, but I think that's a great idea. The 4th item on the plan, create appraisal predictability. The current appraisal process is unnecessarily burdensome, and Texans should not be troubled with appraisal protests year after year. It strains families and businesses and allows taxing entities to take more of your money while blaming rising values. Governor Abbott's plan will require that all properties be appraised only once every 5 years. That means fewer surprises, less red tape, and more peace of mind for Texas families and businesses. Absolutely great idea. Tarrant County did this. I've said this before, but Tim O'Hare is the most conservative county judge in the state of Texas. And Tim O'Hare already said, hey, he basically pushed to say, we're going to appraise properties every 2 or 3 years. And then the legislature tried to rein him in. They tried to shut that down. So this is a great step in the right direction. Aren't you sick and tired of you protest your appraisals, You prove that they're overappraising your property. They bring your property down, and then a year later, you get a notice, and they're like, we're taking it back up to that thing that we agreed it wasn't worth. Happens every year, and you have to fight them every single year. Great idea. Curb appraisal growth for all property owners. Cap appraisal growth at 3%. I don't need to read word for word. Let me explain this. Your homestead appraisal, even if your appraisal is $200,000. I know most of you have homes more than $200,000, but just bear with me for the sake of ease. Let's just be a little more realistic. I think the average median home is like $375,000 in Texas. Let's say $500,000. Your home's $500,000. Okay. It can only go up in appraised value 10% a year. So even if the appraisal is that it's worth $650,000, it's only actually going to go up on the appraisal to $550,000, 10% a year. But then what happens, by the way, is that because it was appraised at $650,000, you're built in an automatic 10% increase every year for the next 3 years, essentially speaking, unless for some reason the appraisal goes down the next year or the next. But how often does that really happen? So Governor Abbott is capping the homestead appraisal increase at 3% for homesteads. So we're going to go from a 10% cap in appraisal increases to a 3% cap. Absolutely great. Then here is, I think, the absolute best part of the plan, and I saved it for last. He probably did too, because it's the last part on his plan. Eliminate school property taxes for homeowners. Eliminate school property taxes, which is 40 to 50% of your tax bill, for homeowners. And here's what the governor's plan says. Despite record property tax relief provided by the state, local governments and tax increases have wiped out billions in savings for homeowners. More must be done to rein in out-of-control property taxes. The school district property taxes are the largest portion of Texas homeowners' tax bills, and voters deserve the right to decide whether to abolish school district property taxes. Under Governor Abbott's plan, voters will have the right to decide through a constitutional amendment to eliminate school district property taxes on homeowners. This is what that would mean. If you move into a home and you file a homestead exemption, this is my home, I reside here, that homestead exemption will cap your appraisals from 10% to 3%. But if this constitutional amendment passed, you would not pay. You would not pay M&O property tax. 40% of your tax bill would be wiped out. That is absolutely fantastic. I said this before, but this is the most aggressive property tax plan I have seen rolled out by any of the big three during my entire time in Texas politics. So I think that is absolutely fantastic. And I hope y'all are following along. It will be interesting to see what either competing property tax plans people put out or how much people rally around the governor's plan, which I think is a great, huge, it's not a small step. If we pass those 6, I want to be very clear. If we pass those 6 things, that would not be a small step in the right direction for property tax relief. That would not be somewhat, it's at least getting in the right direction. I would say that that would be a massive step. It would take a massive chunk out of the entire property tax fight we've had for the last decade and finally force most of these bills down. And what it would also mean is that every time we do provide more relief from the state level as our economy grows, it actually eats away at your property tax bill instead of that bill just getting gobbled up by other local governments.
America is at a crossroads. Now, more than ever, Texas must step up and lead the country. We don't have time to mess around. The only way to save America is with a strong Texas. You and I know this, but so do the enemies of life and liberty. Therefore, you and I have no choice but to stand up and fight. I'm Sarah Gonzalez, and to the enemies of liberty, I say, come and take it.
Now, Sarah Gonzalez shared this, the Islamification of Texas, and this is an update that y'all need. According to local officials, the developers of Epic City, that is the Muslim city that's being built in Collin County and Hunt County. According to local officials, the developers of Epic City, the planned Islamic community outside Josephine, Texas, are responding to statewide backlash by quietly renaming the project, quote, The Meadow, unquote. Development group Community Capital Partners, LLC, appears to be getting ready to submit their plans to Collin County for review. It's CCP, Community Capital Partners. CCP is the company behind Epic City, an Islamic-focused community planned near Josephine, Texas. According to a diagram of the planned neighborhood, the developers have changed the name of the project to The Meadow. No plat has been filed with Collin County, but there are reports that CCP have filed or soon intend to file an application with the Texas Commission of Environmental Quality to form a municipal utility district for the development project. County officials also expect a plat application to be filed with the county soon. We cannot allow the invasion to continue. That is from Sarah Gonzalez. Here's what you need to know. A municipal utility district during the legislative session needs to pass the legislature. It gets filed as a bill. It gets voted on by the legislature. There was a lot, when bad MUDs get formed, then the elected officials get held accountable. The developers are going to try to get this municipal utility district approved by the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, TCEQ. And they're doing so because they can get it approved and no elected official ever got their hands dirty in the process. And that's what they're pushing. There should be statewide backlash against this, and there should be a lot of pressure put on TCEQ to ensure that they do not approve this application for a municipal utility district. There is nothing under law that requires them to approve this MUD, and it should absolutely be rejected. And if they want to get Salmon Bajani or Lalani, Representative Lalani, to file a municipal utility district to try to push these Muslim communities, they have 2 Muslim members, they could try that. I don't think it will go anywhere, but we need to make sure that TCEQ does not turn around and try to fast track their application. It's something that all of us should be following closely. Last but not least, there was a poll released by Chris Wilson, who is a prominent pollster here in Texas, that showed that Don Huffines was not only beating Kelly Hancock and Christy Craddock, but he was beating Kelly Hancock in Kelly's own Senate District 9. Now, this is the Senate District where we just had a very contentious election where casinos came in and tried to buy the Senate. We talked about this last episode. They spent $3.5 million behind John Huffman. Senator Kelly Hancock intentionally stayed out. It seemed as though Kelly Hancock was trying to make sure that casinos kind of had a free shot at that district to get a pro-casino person in. If you have followed the news, you would see Texas Scorecard wrote a story about how John Jackson is running Kelly Hancock's campaign, and John Jackson left the Sands Corporation. He was the government affairs director, internal, worked like their entire internal political team, and now has shifted to work for Kelly Hancock. I know John Jackson. I've known John Jackson for a while. He's worked for various campaigns. He's actually a very smart operator. You should not take him lightly. You should take him very seriously because he knows what he's doing. But to be clear, I know him. I don't dislike John, but he's worked hand in hand with Sands Casinos to try to expand casino gaming in Texas and was running the team that was going after a lot of these more conservative people. And now he is running Kelly Hancock's campaign, which might have contributed towards Kelly Hancock staying out of that SD9 battle. He endorsed Lee Wamsgans after she won and beat John Huffman. He came in, which I'm grateful to see. Republicans should be uniting to make sure that that seat stays red. But Kelly Hancock is actually losing his own Senate district right now. According to pollster Chris Wilson, it is Don Huffines 30%, Kelly Hancock 16%, and Christy Craddock 12%. Kelly, of course, was one of the 2 Republicans to actually vote to impeach Ken Paxton, which is one reason why a lot of Republicans, even in his own district, do not like him. And then things like the casino issue and others could be contributing towards his low performance in his own backyard. Typically, what happens with statewide elections is everyone has a regional base that they have, right? So Don Huffines is from Dallas, and then Huffines has all of the car dealerships. So they're known very well in DFW. So naturally, Huffines is known more in DFW than anywhere else. And then Christy Craddock is from West Texas, right? Her dad just announced for re-election Tom Craddock. And if Tom Craddock gets re-elected, he will have been in the legislature for 60 years. At the end of this term, he will have been in the legislature for 60 years. He just announced for re-election. So as you can imagine, if you're in West Texas, you know who Tom Craddock is. And Christy Craddock has been elected statewide. So what you see with her, and I've looked at polling all across the state, in all sorts of congressional districts and legislative districts, Christy Craddock has consistently this 15% level of support because she's been elected statewide before. So some people just know her or like her or have supported her in the past. But in West Texas, she's much more liked and known. The Craddock name is more known. The Huffines name is more known. You would expect for Kelly Hancock to be really well supported in Tarrant County because he leads a Bible study, and Tarrant County is a faithful Christian who's led a Bible study fellowship for a long time. He was a school board member in Tarrant County. He was a state representative in Tarrant County. He was a state senator in Tarrant County. He has been a pillar in Tarrant County politics for a long time. So for him to not be winning in not only Tarrant County, but Senate District 9, where he represents, is telling. We are starting to see a lot of activity. Some of y'all have reached out about radio ads you've heard from Mays Middleton or streaming that you're getting from his campaign. You see a very competitive attorney general race with Chip Roy, Mays Middleton, Aaron Reitz, Joan Huffman. I look at that race as Aaron Reitz, Joan Huffman, and Mays Middleton basically competing for who's going to come in second place with Chip Roy. Chip Roy is going to be in the runoff, in my opinion. And the question is going to be, who's going to be in the runoff with him? Mays, Aaron, or Joan? And you see Mays, who will probably spend more money than Aaron and Joan combined, in my opinion, spending early, which is necessary to move him. A lot of the polling has had him either in fourth or third, so to try to get him up into that race. It's very competitive. You have three more conservative options with Aaron Reitz, Mays Middleton, and Chip Roy. And then Joan Huffman is the most moderate of the entire group, by far. Anyways, all sorts of things are happening across Texas. Beau French is running for railroad commissioner. The governor's announcing for re-election, rolling out this property tax plan. There's new polling in the comptroller's race. The attorney general's campaign is being stirred up a little bit with Mays Middleton probably dropping because some of you got mail from him. I bet you it's a $1.5 million expenditure, maybe $2 million expenditure over the last 2-3 weeks to kind of get himself more known statewide. So you're seeing all of these moves, and it's just the beginning. You are about to see a lot more from every single one of those candidates running. Guys, I hope y'all are paying attention to all that's happening because the result of these elections is going to determine the direction that Texas goes. And if the SD9 race was any indicator, you have some establishment forces that are gearing up to spend a lot of money. Texans for Lawsuit Reform, SANS, these groups want to move Texas back to the middle. And it's important that we understand that every gain we get every election cycle can only be held if conservatives stay on the alert, if they pay attention, if they don't lose their focus. And that's one of the things I try to do on this show, is just orient y'all towards what's going on and tell you where the most important battles are and what it means for the future of Texas. May God bless you, and may God bless our great state.